Joe Callahan spent 23 years inside a petrochemical refinery in Houston, Texas. He wasn't an executive, he wasn't an engineer with a corner office. He was the maintenance supervisor, the man who kept everything running, the man nobody noticed, until the day a new corporate director decided Joe was too expensive to keep. They eliminated his position. They canceled his health insurance while his wife was in chemotherapy. And they did it on a Tuesday morning, without warning, without shame. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, is that for 23 years, Joe had written down everything. Every inspection, every violation, every shortcut they told him to take and pretend never happened. 23 notebooks. This is the story of what Joe did with them.
Houston, Texas, 5:47 in the morning. Joe Callahan is sitting in the driver's seat of his 2009 F-150 pickup truck, parked on the shoulder of Highway 225, the same highway he drove for 23 years to reach the Nexcore petrochemical refinery. The engine is off. He is not moving. In his right hand, a cup of coffee from 7-Eleven. In his left hand, a black notebook worn at the edges, with the number 23 written in white tape on the cover. He looks through the window at the refinery stacks on the horizon, the flame from the eternal flare, orange against the dark sky. He knows every structure in that place, every valve, every leaking pipe he reported and nobody fixed. He thinks, 23 years. Today might be the last day. He doesn't know yet how right he is. Joe Callahan is 52 years old. He is not an engineer. He doesn't have an MBA. He has a technical certificate from Houston Community College, class of 1994, and the most calloused hands on the morning shift. He joined Nexcore in May of 2001 as a junior maintenance technician. He fixed hydraulic pumps, inspected safety valves, recorded pressure readings on paper spreadsheets when the digital system went down, which happened more often than the company liked to admit. In 2008, he was promoted to maintenance supervisor. Not because he asked, because the previous supervisor had a heart attack in the equipment yard, and Joe was the only one who knew how to do the man's job without a manual. Since then, he had supervised a team of 14 technicians. He trained 42 employees over the years. Some of them are now supervisors at other refineries. Some still text him when they have a technical question. Joe never missed a shift due to illness, not once. In 23 years, he took medical leave one time, when his wife, Karen, was diagnosed with breast cancer the previous March. He was out for 4 days. He came back before the doctor recommended it because the refinery had a problem with the leak containment system and he was the only one who knew the entire plant. Karen Callahan is 49 years old, a public school teacher for 21 years. She teaches 8th grade math at Frank Black Middle School in the Acres Homes neighborhood. When the diagnosis came, it was stage 2 breast cancer, treatable. The oncologist was direct, 6 months of chemotherapy, then radiation. Good prognosis if treatment was completed without interruption. The Nexcore health plan covered everything. Joe checked 3 times. He talked to HR. The oncology coverage was one of the reasons he had never considered leaving the company, even in the years when the bonus didn't come and management changed every 6 months. Karen was in her 4th month of chemotherapy when everything changed. In September of the previous year, Nexcore was acquired by Vantage Energy Group, a Houston conglomerate with an office in Dallas that bought smaller refineries, cut operational costs, and resold them at a profit within 3 to 5 years. The new director of operations arrived in October. Derek Shaw, 38 years old, light blue dress shirt, no tie, the kind of person who uses informality as a power strategy. MBA from Wharton, never worked a day on a plant floor. The first meeting Derek held with the supervisors lasted 40 minutes. He used the words operational efficiency 11 times. Joe counted. It was in notebook 23, page 4, with the date and time. Joe thinks, this guy has never smelled diesel in his life, but he's going to tell me how to optimize my operation. He says nothing. He just takes notes. November. Derek begins holding individual meetings with each supervisor. Joe's lasts 12 minutes. Derek looks at a spreadsheet on his laptop screen and says, "Joe, your team is great on compliance, but I need us to think differently about what is essential here. Some of your documentation practices, for example, are excessive for what OSHA requires." Joe listens. He answers, "With respect, Derek, some of those practices prevented 3 serious accidents in the last 8 years. I have the records if you need them." Derek smiles, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "We don't need more paper, Joe. We need agility." Joe leaves the meeting and writes in his notebook, "D. Shaw, Nov 14th, asked for reduction of documentation. I declined. He didn't like it." In December, Vantage Energy sends Nextcore a workforce review list. That is the corporate euphemism for mass layoffs. Joe doesn't know he is on the list, but he begins to notice the signs. His access to certain system reports is revoked without explanation. The HR team stops responding to his emails about updating the safety equipment for Team B. And on a Friday in December, walking past the second-floor hallway, Joe hears through a half-open door a sentence that stops his blood cold. The problem with Callahan is that he knows too much and documents too much. That kind of employee is a liability, not an asset. Joe stops in the hallway, takes a deep breath, keeps walking. That night, at home, while Karen sleeps on the sofa after chemo, she always sleeps after chemo, Joe opens notebook 23 and writes everything down. The time, the place, the exact words. He thinks, liability. After 23 years, I'm a liability. And then he thinks something else. Something colder, fine. Then treat me like a liability. I know what I have in these notebooks. January 3rd, a Tuesday. Joe arrives at the refinery at 6:15 as always. He does the morning safety check with the team, gets coffee in the supervisor's room. At 9:30, Derek's assistant appears in the doorway and says, "Joe, Derek needs you in meeting room B, now." Joe looks at Tomas, his most senior technician, who is standing nearby. Tomas looks away. Joe realizes Tomas already knew. In meeting room B, besides Derek, there is a woman Joe has never seen before. Gray suit, briefcase on the table, HR from Vantage Energy, in from Dallas. Derek doesn't offer coffee. He doesn't make a long introduction. He opens a sheet of paper and says, "Joe, due to an operational restructuring, your position as maintenance supervisor is being eliminated effective immediately. Today is your last day." Joe feels his heart beat once, very hard. Just once. Then he goes quiet. The HR woman slides an envelope across the table. "Here is your severance package. 60 days of pay. Health benefits end on the last day of the month." Joe looks at the envelope. He doesn't pick it up. He thinks, the last day of the month is 28 days from now. Karen has 2 more months of chemo. He looks at Derek and asks, in a completely steady voice, "The health plan. My wife is in active oncology treatment." Derek's expression doesn't change. "There are continuation options through Cobra. HR can explain." Joe knows what Cobra is. He knows it costs $2,300 a month. He knows he doesn't have $2,300 a month to spare. He thinks, they knew. They knew about Karen, and they did it anyway. Joe signs the badge return form. He does not sign the confidentiality agreement. The HR woman says he has 21 days to decide. He keeps the envelope without opening it. He collects his things from the supervisor's room. A mug, a photo of Karen, a scientific calculator, and the last 2 notebooks that were in the file drawer, numbers 22 and 23. Thomas is at the door of the room when Joe leaves. He can't make eye contact. Joe puts a hand on his shoulder and says, "Keep an eye on the relief valve on Unit 3. It's been vibrating differently since November. I reported it. Nobody did anything. Don't let it slide." Tomas swallows hard. He nods. Joe crosses the yard, gets in the truck, buckles his seatbelt. He sits for 2 minutes without doing anything. Then he picks up the phone and calls Karen. She answers on the second ring. Her voice is hoarse, a side effect of the chemo. Joe? What happened? He answers, "They let me go, Karen." Silence. "And the health plan?" "I'll take care of it. I promise I'll take care of it." She doesn't cry. Neither does he. But when he hangs up the phone, Joe Callahan rests his forehead on the steering wheel and stays like that for a long time, listening to the sound of the refinery stacks he kept running for 23 years. That night, Joe opens the closet in the guest bedroom. Inside, stacked in order, are 23 black notebooks, each one with a number in white tape, each one with the year on the spine. He begins leafing through notebook number 18, 2019, the date when NextCore shut down the pressure monitoring system of Unit 7 for 72 hours to avoid the maintenance cost, and Joe recorded everything by hand, with hourly measurements, because he thought one day he might need to prove what had happened. He leafs through notebook 20, 2021, when Derek, before he was Derek, when he was just a promise of a new efficiency manager, authorized by email the reduction of safety valve inspection intervals from 30 to 90 days without regulatory approval. Joe had printed that email and taped it into the notebook. It's still there, yellowed but legible. He thinks, "They called me a liability. Fine. Let me show them what 23 years of liability accumulated." Joe closes notebook 20, picks up his phone, searches for a name in his contacts he hasn't accessed in 2 years. Ray Gutierrez, OSHA Inspector, South Texas Region. They worked together during a routine inspection in 2019. Ray had left that meeting shaken by what Joe showed him. At the time, Joe had no authorization to officially share anything, but Ray had left his card. "If you ever need it, Joe, you know where to find me." Joe looks at the stack of 23 notebooks. He types the message, "Ray, it's Joe Callahan, from NextCore. I was just let go. I have 23 years of records you need to see. When can you meet?" He hits send. Then he looks at the bedroom door where Karen is sleeping. And for the first time since Tuesday morning, Joe Callahan feels something different from the weight. He feels purpose. Thursday, 7 in the morning. Joe is sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and 3 notebooks beside it. The coffee maker is still gurgling. Karen is in the bedroom getting ready to go to the clinic. Today is blood test day before chemo, which means next week's session only happens if the numbers come back right. Joe didn't sleep well. He spent the last 2 nights cataloging the notebooks, building a spreadsheet with dates, incidents, names, equipment numbers. 23 years turned into rows of Excel. The phone vibrates. Ray Gutierrez replied, "Joe, miss you. Call me when you can. I want to hear everything." Joe looks toward the bedroom, hears Karen moving, picks up the phone and goes to the backyard. Ray Gutierrez is 57 years old, senior OSHA inspector for 16 years. Before that, he worked 6 years in a refinery, which is why he understands the plant floor in a way that most desk inspectors don't. When he picks up, his voice is the same as always. Direct. "Joe, tell me." Joe tells him everything. The arrival of Derek Shaw, the meetings, the request to reduce documentation, the Tuesday morning termination, the health plan canceled with Karen and active chemo. Ray listens without interrupting. When Joe finishes, there is 5 seconds of silence. The notebooks. "You still have all of them?" "All 23, from day 1 to yesterday." "Joe, I need you to understand something before we go further. If what you have is what I think it is, this is bigger than a wrongful termination. A lot bigger. You understand what I'm saying?" Joe looks at the NextCore stacks visible on the Houston horizon. "I understand. Did you sign the confidentiality agreement?" "No, I have 21 days. I'm not signing." Ray takes a deep breath. "Don't sign it. Don't talk to anyone at the company. And don't show those notebooks to anyone before you talk to an employment attorney. Do you have one?" "No. I have a name. Sandra Reeves. She's good. Very good. Talk to her first. Then call me back." Sandra Reeves is 47 years old, employment attorney with an office in Midtown Houston, daughter of an oil platform worker. She knows the industry from the inside. Joe calls that same morning. The The secretary says Sandra is in a hearing. Joe leaves a message. Sandra calls back at 2 in the afternoon. The conversation lasts 20 minutes. Joe explains the situation. Sandra asks short, precise questions. The health plan cancellation with a spouse in active oncology treatment. Do you have the diagnosis date documented? I do. Do you have the HR email confirming coverage before the termination? I do. And the notebooks. You're telling me you have handwritten records of operational irregularities covering how long? 23 years. Brief silence. Joe, I need to see those notebooks in person. When can you come to my office? Joe thinks. She went quiet the same way Ray went quiet. That silence means something. Tomorrow morning. If that works. It works. Bring everything. Friday evening. Joe and Karen are in the kitchen. She made soup. On the days after chemo, it's what she can eat. He sliced the bread. Karen looks at the notebook stacked on the dining table, which Joe has been using as a workspace for the past few days. 23 years of notebooks, Joe. Yes. You always did this since the first year. My dad taught me. He worked 30 years at a chemical plant in Beaumont. He used to say, write everything down because paper doesn't lie and memory fails. Karen looks at the notebooks for a moment. He was right. Joe places his hand over hers on the table. I'll fix the health plan, Karen. I won't let the treatment stop. She doesn't answer right away. Then she says, with the calm of someone who has learned to live with uncertainty, I know you will. But Joe, don't do this just for the health plan. Do it because it's right. Joe looks at her. It's both. All right. Both then. Saturday morning, Sandra Reeves receives Joe in a windowless conference room. Walls covered with bookshelves full of bound case files. Coffee and a thermos on the table. She's already working when Joe arrives, at 9 sharp. Joe places the 23 notebooks on the conference table. Sandra looks at the stack, then looks at Joe. You numbered them in chronological order? Yes. 1 through 1, first to last. Each notebook has an index on the first page with the incidents recorded that year. You made an index, always did. Sandra opens notebook 1, leaves through it slowly, then skips to number 15, then to number 20. She spends 40 minutes reading in silence while Joe drinks coffee. When she finishes, she closes the notebook and folds her hands on the table. Joe, I'm going to be direct with you. What you have here is potentially one of the most complete records of systematic operational negligence I have ever seen in an employment case. But before I talk about your termination, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you have any idea what could happen to Nexcore and Vantage Energy if these records go to the right regulatory authorities? Joe answers without hesitating. I do. That's why I wrote everything down. Sandra picks up a notepad and begins listing as she speaks. Notebook 8, June 2009. You recorded that the safety valve on Unit 4 was inspected at an irregular interval, 62 days instead of the 30 required by OSHA regulation for high-pressure equipment. And you have the name of the supervisor who authorized the delay. Bradley Holt. He was with the company until 2018. Notebook 18, 2019. The unauthorized shutdown of the monitoring system for 72 hours. You have hourly manual readings. I do. 144 readings. Date, time, value, my signature. Notebook 20, 2021. The email authorizing the reduction of valve inspection intervals from 30 to 90 days, signed by the regional supervisor at the time. Who was Joe? Marcus Treen. Today he is the operational safety manager at Vantage Energy in Dallas. Sandra stops writing. She looks at Joe with an expression that mixes admiration and gravity. Joe, there is a federal protocol called whistleblower protection. If you go through the correct process, the law does not allow retaliation against you. And there is an additional mechanism. If the complaint results in federal fines against the company, the whistleblower is entitled to a percentage of the amount collected by the EPA or OSHA. Joe frowns. I'm not doing this for money. I know. But you need to understand that the law protects you. and that protecting your wife is legitimate within this process. The following Monday, Joe is at home when he receives a call from an unknown number. He answers. Joe, this is Derek. Joe sits down. He picks up notebook 23 and opens it to a blank page. He clicks his pen. Derek, we need to talk. In person. Can you come to the office tomorrow? Joe thinks. He knows I didn't sign the agreement. Someone told him. Probably HR. You can talk here. Brief silence on the other end. Joe, I know the way things were handled wasn't ideal. There is room to revisit the severance package, including matters related to benefits. Joe writes in the notebook, D. Shaw, phone call, Monday, offered quote revision of package, did not specify amount, tone controlled but nervous. I'll consult my attorney and be in touch, Derek. Pause. You hired an attorney? I have 21 days to decide. I'm using the time. Derek hangs up without saying goodbye. Joe closes the notebook. He thinks, he called because he's scared. He doesn't know what I have, but he knows I have something. On Tuesday, Joe receives a message from Thomas, his former technician. No text, just a photo. It is the relief valve on Unit 3, the one Joe warned about before he left. In the photo, you can see a crack in the connection flange, small, but on a petrochemical refinery relief valve, small does not exist. Joe types, did you report it? Thomas, I sent an email to Derek last Friday. Nothing yet. Joe, Thomas, this is urgent. Take photos of everything. Date and time in the photo. Keep them. Thomas, Joe, I could lose my job if... Joe, you could lose a lot more if that valve gives way and you haven't reported it. Trust me. 3 minutes of silence. Thomas. Okay. Joe picks up notebook 23 and opens it. He writes the date, the time, the content of Tomas's message, the valve number, its location in the plant, the inspection history he himself conducted over the last 4 years. Then he calls Sandra. Sandra, we have a second problem, and this one can't wait. Sandra listens to everything about the valve. When Joe finishes, she says, Joe, if there is an imminent risk of accident, this changes the nature of the process. This is not just an employment and regulatory complaint anymore. This is public safety, I know. You need to call Ray Gutierrez right now, not tomorrow, right now. Can he act fast? If you present the documented inspection history from your notebooks along with the current photo, he has grounds for an unannounced inspection. OSHA can enter the plant within 24 hours if the risk is classified as immediate. Joe thinks about Thomas, about all 14 technicians on his team, about all the other workers at the refinery who don't know the valve has a crack and that the alert email is sitting unanswered in Derek Shaw's inbox. I'm calling right now. Joe dials Ray Gutierrez. While the phone rings, he opens his laptop. He searches for the address of the OSHA regional office for South Texas. Then he searches for something else. EPA, Region 6, Houston, Texas, Environmental Complaint Hotline. Because in notebooks 16 and 17, there is something Joe has not yet told Sandra. Something that happened in 2017 and 2018, when Nexcor disposed of process waste above permitted levels. And Joe recorded everything without knowing exactly what to do with the information. Now he knows. Ray answers. Joe. Ray. I need you to come to Houston. I have more than I thought. Wednesday, noon, Ray Gutierrez lands at William P. Hobby Airport with a work backpack and a folder. He didn't bring a suitcase and he'll be back on the same day if things move the way he expects. Joe meets him in the parking lot. They greet each other with a firm handshake. Ray looks at Joe for a moment. He takes in the tiredness on his face, the dark circles, the posture of a man who hasn't slept well in a week. How's Karen? Strong. Stronger than me. Ray nods. He doesn't ask anything more about that. He gets in the truck. Tell me about the valve first. Then the notebooks. Sandra Reeves reserved the conference room at her office for the afternoon. At 2 o'clock, the three of them are seated at the table, Joe, Ray, and Sandra. The 23 notebooks are stacked at one end. Sandra's laptop is open. Ray has a voice recorder on the table. He asked permission before turning it on. Joe starts from the beginning. He speaks for 40 minutes without stopping. Dates, names, equipment numbers, email addresses of supervisors who authorized irregular procedures. Ray interrupts 7 times, each time to confirm a technical detail that Joe answers from memory, then points to the exact page in the corresponding notebook. When Joe finishes, Ray is silent for a moment. Joe, I need to be honest with you about what this represents. Go ahead. The Unit 3 valve alone is grounds for an emergency inspection. But what you have in the notebooks, especially the monitoring system shut down in 2019 and the unauthorized reduction of inspection intervals in 2021, that is systematic violation of standards under 29 CFR 1910.119. Process safety management. For a petrochemical refinery, it's one of the most serious regulations on the books. Sandra takes notes. And the waste disposal in 2017 and 2018. Ray looks at Joe. You have volumes, dates, and disposal locations? I do. Notebooks 16 and 17, with hand-drawn maps of the disposal points. Ray closes his eyes for 2 seconds. That's EPA, Clean Air Act and Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. Federal. That takes it out of my OSHA jurisdiction and into a completely different level. How much bigger? Fines starting in the tens of millions. Depending on what the EPA finds in the soil, it could reach hundreds of millions, and criminal liability for the executives who authorized it. Silence in the room. Joe thinks, they called me a liability. They canceled Karen's health plan, and they had all of this buried in the operational history. What do I need to do? Sandra speaks first. Joe, before anything else, let's separate what is urgent from what is strategic. Urgent, the Unit 3 valve. That involves workers at risk right now. Ray, how quickly can you file for an unannounced inspection based on what Joe has presented? With the documentation he has, I can file today. The inspection can happen within 24 to 48 hours. NextCorp won't be notified in advance. That means Derek Shaw won't know you're coming. Not until we're at the gate. Joe thinks about Thomas, about the other technicians. He feels some of the weight lift from his chest. Sandra continues. Strategic, the full complaint. OSHA for the process safety violations. EPA for the waste disposal. That is built carefully to maximize Joe's legal protection and the impact of the complaints. How long does it take? To do it right? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But Joe, there is another element here we haven't discussed yet. What is it? Your termination itself. The health plan cancellation with a spouse in active treatment. Depending on how this was structured, it may constitute a violation of federal ERISA law, which protects employee benefits. And there is precedent for a damages action that includes full coverage of the medical treatment and compensation. Joe looks at her. You're saying I can force them to reinstate Karen's health plan? I'm saying there is legal grounds to demand that as part of a settlement, or to prove it in court. But there is something even more direct available. What? The confidentiality agreement they want you to sign. As long as you haven't signed it, they are exposed. Every day that passes without your signature is a day you can take this further. They know that. They'll try to pressure me. Certainly. And when they do, you will be ready. Thursday, 7:45 in the morning. 2 OSHA vehicles pull through the main gate of NextCorp Petrochemical. Ray Gutierrez in front, credentials in hand, 2 technical inspectors behind him. The receptionist immediately calls the executive floor. Derek's secretary tries to reach him. Derek is on a call with Dallas. Ray presents the unannounced inspection protocol. The gate cannot deny entry. It's federal law. 11 minutes later, Ray and his team are at Unit 3. The valve is exactly as Thomas photographed it, the crack in the flange. Ray examines it personally, takes photos, requests the most recent maintenance records. The technician on duty, not Thomas, a new young worker Joe never trained, takes 8 minutes to find the records because he doesn't know where they are filed. Ray notes that too. When Derek Shaw arrives in the yard, 22 minutes after being notified, the inspection is already documented. He sees Ray. He stops. Ray looks at him with the calm of someone who has done this hundreds of times. Mr. Shaw, Ray Gutierrez, OSHA. Unit 3 is being isolated for immediate risk assessment. I'll need the complete preventive maintenance records for the past 24 months. Derek answers with a controlled voice. This inspection was requested by whom? By anonymous complaint protocol, Mr. Shaw. It's standard procedure. That is not a lie. The complaint was filed anonymously by Ray based on the information Joe provided. Joe's name appears nowhere in this phase. Derek looks at the yard, at the technicians who have stopped working to watch, at the valve isolated with OSHA tape. He thinks, Callahan. He doesn't say it out loud. Friday. Sandra receives the preliminary OSHA report by email at 4 in the afternoon. She calls Joe immediately. The Unit 3 valve was classified as an immediate hazard. NextCore received a partial operations shutdown order until replacement and full inspection of the relief system. And Ray found 2 additional non-compliances during the inspection that were not part of the original scope. Which ones? Unit 7's spill containment system with maintenance overdue since October, and emergency training records for the night shift team, incomplete since July. Joe closes his eyes. I reported the Unit 7 system in September. It's in Notebook 23, page 32. I know. I already photographed that page. And now Derek Shaw has a much bigger problem than you, Joe. The partial shutdown is going to cost money. Vantage Energy in Dallas is going to ask why, and when they ask, someone is going to have to explain how a crack in a relief valve went unnoticed after the 23-year maintenance supervisor was let go. Joe is quiet for a moment. Sandra, when can we file the full complaint? I'm working on the documents, but Joe, before that, Derek Shaw is going to call you again. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And when he calls, you answer, you listen. You don't mention the notebooks. You don't mention the EPA, and you record the call. In Texas, it's legal to record without notifying the other party. Understood? And Joe, don't accept anything he offers without talking to me first, no matter what number he puts on the table. Saturday morning, Joe is in the living room when Karen comes in with 2 cups of coffee. She is better today. The blood test numbers came back within range. Next week's chemo is confirmed. She sits beside him on the sofa. She looks at the laptop, the notebooks, the notepad covered in Joe's handwriting. Tell me, Joe tells her, everything. The OSHA inspection, the valve, the report, what Sandra said about the EPA, what might come next. Karen listens without interrupting. When he finishes, she is silent for a moment. Joe, the waste they disposed of, in 2017 and 2018. Yes. Where was the disposal site? Joe hesitates. Near the industrial drainage canal on the south boundary of the plant. Karen looks at him. The canal that drains into the bayside. Yes. And there are families living along that canal, Joe. Joe closes his eyes. I know, Karen. Then this is not about us. It was never just about us. Joe opens his eyes. He looks at the woman who is in her 4th month of chemotherapy and still has more moral clarity than the entire executive board of Vantage Energy. No, it was never just about us. Saturday, 6:42 in the evening. Derek calls. Joe answers. The phone is already recording. He set up the app the night before following Sandra's instructions. Joe, I know it was you who contacted OSHA. Joe neither confirms nor denies. He answers, what do you need, Derek? We need to resolve this intelligently. For both sides. Vantage Energy is prepared to be significantly more generous than the original package. Retroactive reinstatement of the health plan, 12 months of salary, and an agreement that protects both sides. Joe writes in the notebook while talking. Every word. 12 months of salary and reinstatement of the health plan. That's right. And continuation of the plan for an additional 24 months. Joe thinks. He's scared. The offer has tripled in 10 days. Derek, I'll need to run this by my attorney. Joe, how much time do you need? Because the situation is becoming... I'll call her now. She'll be in touch with your legal team. Derek takes a deep breath. Joe, do you have any idea of the size of the problem you could create here? For the company, for people's jobs? Joe interrupts in a completely calm voice. Derek, you created the problem when you didn't fix the Unit 3 valve after I reported it. I just kept records. Silence. I'll speak with my attorney. Joe hangs up. He saves the recording. He sends it to Sandra immediately. Monday, Sandra and Joe are in her office. Ray is on speakerphone. Sandra has notebooks 16 and 17 open on the table, marked with yellow post-its on 12 different pages. Joe, what you documented in 2017 and 2018 is sufficient for a formal complaint to the EPA under the RCRA program, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. If soil analyses confirm contamination in the canal area, penalties can reach $70,000 per day per violation, multiplied by the period. And Vantage Energy, as the acquiring company, assumes NextCore's liability. How long does it take for the EPA to act? After the formal filing, between 30 and 60 days for an initial inspection. But there is a faster path. Which one? If the complaint comes with evidence of imminent risk to a residential community, which the drainage canal to the bayside represents, the EPA can classify it as a priority and act within days. Joe thinks about Karen, about the canal, about the families. File it. Everything. Sandra looks at him for a second, then at Ray on speakerphone. Ray, we're ready. On Tuesday morning, Sandra sends 2 documents simultaneously. The first goes to the Vantage Energy legal team, a formal letter detailing the legal basis for Joe Callahan's wrongful termination, the ERISA violation in the health plan cancellation, and the minimum conditions for an out-of-court settlement. The number on the page makes the Vantage attorney go silent for 4 seconds before responding. The second document goes to EPA Region 6 in Dallas. 53 pages, dates, volumes, locations, hand-drawn maps, notebooks 16 and 17, fully photographed and indexed. Signed, Joseph R. Callahan, Maintenance Supervisor, NextCore Petrochemical, 23 years of service. While both documents move through federal servers, Derek Shaw is in an emergency video conference with the CEO of Vantage Energy in Dallas. The CEO has a simple question. Derek, who is Joe Callahan, and why is his name showing up in all of this? Derek doesn't have a good answer. Thursday, 8 in the morning. Joe is in the kitchen when Sandra calls. He answers before the second ring. Joe, Vantage's legal team responded, and they want an in-person meeting this afternoon, here at my office. Joe puts his cup in the sink. Who's coming? Vantage Energy's senior attorney. And Joe, it's not their local Houston counsel. It's their general counsel, from Dallas, himself. Joe thinks, the general counsel. They didn't send a junior, they sent the man. What time? 2 o'clock. Can you make it? I'll be there at 1:30. Sandra hesitates for a second. Joe, they're going to try to land on a number that makes you stop everything and sign. I need you to walk into that room knowing exactly what you want and what you won't give up. It's not just about money. I know what I want. Tell me. I want Karen's health plan reinstated retroactively and maintained until the end of her treatment. I want the company to voluntarily notify OSHA and the EPA about all violations, not as a response to the complaint, but as a formal act of acknowledgement. I want formal reinstatement in my employment record with no negative mark. And I want Thomas and the maintenance team to face no retaliation. Silence from Sandra. Joe, that last item, the team's protection. You know it's difficult to guarantee contractually. Then put it on paper in a way that makes it hard to violate. That's what you went to law school for. Sandra laughs quietly. 1:30. Joe arrives at Sandra's office with notebooks 22 and 23 under his arm. Not because he'll need them. Sandra already has everything photographed and indexed, but because he wants them in the room. Sandra receives him with coffee and a thin folder. Summary of what we have. Documented OSHA violations. 11 occurrences between 2009 and 2023. Potential EPA violations. Irregular disposal documented on 47 dates between 2017 and 2018. Estimated federal fine value if the processes run their course, between $40 million and $180 million, depending on soil analysis. Joe looks at the numbers. And the employment case itself? Termination with health benefit cancellation during spouse's active oncology treatment. ERISA violation. Estimated compensatory damages between $800,000 and $1.4 million if it goes to trial. But Joe, they don't want to go to trial. A trial makes everything public. I know. And you? Do you want this to be public? Joe looks at her. I want the families near the canal to know what was in the soil. The rest, if they do the right thing, I don't need the spotlight. Sandra nods. Then let's walk into that room. 2 o'clock exactly. The Vantage Energy General Counsel's name is Arthur Brennan, 61 years old, dark blue suit, leather briefcase, the kind of attorney who cost Vantage Energy $850 an hour and was worth every cent in other battles. He greets Joe with a firm handshake and looks at the notebooks on the table with the expression of someone who recognizes them for what they are: evidence. There is no small talk. Brennan opens his briefcase. Mr. Callahan. Vantage Energy acknowledges that the transition process following the Nexcore acquisition could have been handled with more care regarding long-tenured employees. We are here to find a resolution. Joe doesn't respond. He looks at Brennan and waits. Brennan continues. We are prepared to offer immediate reinstatement of the health plan with retroactive coverage from the date of termination. 18 months of salary as severance, a formal reference letter, and a mutual confidentiality agreement. Sandra places an open hand on the table, the signal she and Joe agreed on. She speaks. Mr. Brennan. Mr. Callahan has some conditions that are not part of what you listed. I'll present them. Brennan listens to each item. When Sandra finishes, health plan through end of treatment, voluntary notification to regulatory agencies, formal protection of the maintenance team, he takes notes in silence. Then he raises his eyes. The voluntary notification to the agencies. You understand that implies the company formally acknowledging. Joe speaks for the first time since the meeting began. Mr. Brennan, there are families living along the drainage canal that receives the plant's south effluent. The irregular disposal of 2017 and 2018 is documented in 2 notebooks with 47 dates of occurrence. The EPA already has those documents. The voluntary notification by Vantage Energy is not a concession. It is the difference between the company demonstrating responsibility before the investigation or being found out during it. Silence in the room. Brennan looks at Joe for a long moment. Then at the notebooks. You prepared this over 23 years without knowing you would use it? I prepared it because it was the right thing to do. I didn't know I would use it this way. Brennan closes his briefcase. He looks at Sandra. I need 30 minutes with my client by phone. Joe and Sandra step out to the hallway. She goes to get water. Joe stands near the window that looks out onto the Midtown Houston street. He thinks about Karen, about next week's chemo, about the technicians on his team, about Thomas who sent the photo of the valve knowing he was risking his job. He thinks about notebook number 1, May 2001. First week at the refinery. The less confident handwriting, the less precise notes. A 29-year-old junior technician who only wanted to do the job right. Sandra comes back with the water. How are you doing? Fine. Joe, regardless of what happens in the next 30 minutes, you did the right thing. You protected your team. You protected the families at the canal. That already happened. No one can take that away. Joe looks at her. Karen said something similar. She said this was never just about us. She's right. She almost always is. Brennan opens the door 32 minutes later. We can come back in. They sit down. Brennan opens a new document from his briefcase. Vantage Energy accepts the presented conditions with the following specifications. Health plan reinstated retroactively with full coverage of the current oncology treatment and continuation for 36 months after the end of treatment. 22 months of salary as severance. A formal reference letter with language agreed upon by both parties. Voluntary notification to OSHA and the EPA filed within 15 business days, with the company's legal team cooperating with the investigations. A non-retaliation clause covering maintenance department employees named in the agreement. Joe listens to each item. He confirms each one mentally. Brennan continues. In return, Mr. Callahan agrees to confidentiality regarding the financial terms of the settlement, not regarding the operational facts. Those are already part of the regulatory process, only regarding the amounts. Sandra looks at Joe. Joe nods. One last condition. Brennan raises an eyebrow. The notebooks. All 23. I keep the originals. You can photograph everything for use in the regulatory process, but the originals come home with me. Brennan looks at the notebooks on the table. They are yours, Mr. Callahan. They always were. Joe picks up the pen. He looks at the agreement for a moment. He thinks, 23 years. One pen. Right here. He signs. 4:37 in the afternoon. Joe walks out of Sandra's office with the 23 notebooks in a paper bag. The Houston sun is still high. March. Dry heat and the smell of asphalt. He stops on the sidewalk. He picks up his phone. He calls Karen. She answers on the first ring. Joe. It's over, Karen. 2 seconds of silence. The health plan. Reinstated. Retroactive. 36 months after the end of treatment. He hears the sound she makes. It is not exactly crying, not exactly relief. It is the sound of someone who has held the weight for too long and can finally let it go. And you? Are you okay? Joe looks out at the Houston horizon, at the Nexcore stacks visible in the southern skyline. I'm okay. Come home. I'm already on my way. 6 weeks later, the EPA initiated a formal inspection of the South Drainage Canal area at Nexcore in March. Preliminary soil analyses confirmed the presence of hydrocarbons above permitted levels at 3 points. The investigation is ongoing. OSHA issued formal citations against Nexcore regarding 8 of the 11 documented violations. Preliminary fines, $2.3 million. The company's appeal process is underway, but Joe's notebook records were accepted as primary evidence. Derek Shaw left Nexcore 4 weeks after the settlement meeting. The official statement spoke of a leadership transition. No one at the refinery believed the official version. Marcus Treen, Vantage Energy's operational safety manager in Dallas, the man who signed the authorization to reduce inspection intervals in 2021, is under internal investigation. Thomas was promoted to interim maintenance supervisor. May last chemotherapy session. Joe is in the waiting room at the oncology clinic when Karen comes out with the nurse. She is pale and tired. That is how it always is after the last session, the nurse said. But she is smiling. She sits beside him. She rests her head on his shoulder. They stay like that for a while without speaking. Then Karen says in a low voice, "Your father would have been proud." Joe thinks about his father, the man from Beaumont who worked 30 years at a chemical plant and used to say, "Write everything down because paper doesn't lie and memory fails." I know, Joe. Buy more notebooks. He laughs. For real. The kind of laugh that only comes when the weight is gone. I already did. Joe Callahan did not go back to work for a large company. He opened an independent operational safety consulting firm for mid-sized industrial plants in Texas. The name is simple: Callahan Safety Consulting. The first client was referred by Ray Gutierrez. The second was referred by Sandra Reeves. The third called on his own after reading about the OSHA case in an industry newsletter. He still uses black notebooks. He still numbers them in white tape. He still makes an index on the first page. Notebook 24 began in April, 3 months after the Tuesday morning when he thought everything was over. On the first page, before the index, he wrote one sentence. The same handwriting as notebook number 1. 30 years of habit don't change a man's hand. They thought I was just a maintenance guy. I was the one who kept records of everything.
Joe Callahan was not a CEO. He didn't have a window office, he didn't have an MBA or connections in Dallas. He had calluses on his hands. He had coffee at 5:47 in the morning, and he had 23 black notebooks that nobody ever took seriously. Until the day everybody had to. The lesson Joe leaves us is not about revenge. It is about silent integrity, about doing the right thing every single day, not because someone is watching, but because one day, when no one remembers who you were, the paper will remember. They thought firing Joe solved the problem. The problem was that Joe had become, over 23 years, the only honest record of everything the company wanted to hide. You don't fire a living archive. If this story moved you, if you have ever been the Joe in someone else's story, invisible, underestimated, discarded, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now, because next week we bring a story that will leave you speechless. An emergency room doctor in Miami, 17 years saving lives at the same hospital, until the day the new administrative director decided she knew too much about the fraudulent billing scheme that was destroying patients. She had recordings, she had medical records, and she had a patience he completely underestimated. The Retribution File. Every week, a story that proves justice has a long memory. See you there.